Welcome back to another episode of Acquisitions Anonymous, the internet's #1 podcast about acquiring and operating small businesses. This week's episode is super fascinating. We have a great guest, David Rontal, and our discussion runs the gamut from oil field drilling to internet marketplaces that sell developed oil assets, to cannabis farming in rural Colorado and more. And the parallels actually really surprised me between all of these industries. So David is fantastic. Welcome to the show. I think you guys are all going to really enjoy this week's show. All right. And we're very excited today. We have a fascinating guest with us today to talk about some really interesting stuff that I think you guys have probably all read about in the news, but probably didn't know a lot about. So today we have David Rontal with us. David, glad you're here, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Can you tell our guests a little bit about who you are, what you do?
Sure. I'm David. I'm one of the partners and general counsel at Overland Oil and Gas based out of Denver. We're a privately held business that acquires oil and gas minerals and royalties with a focus on the Rocky Mountain Basin. So Williston Basin in North Dakota and the DJ Basin of Colorado and Wyoming. We're backed by a handful of family offices. We've been doing this with outside capital since about 2016. Currently manage a portfolio of about 20,000 acres, normalized to 1/8 based on our lease rates. And we're invested out of our fourth fund right now, Overland 4. We'll be raising Overland 5 sometime later this year. And, my job primarily is to lead our acquisitions. So get to spend a lot of time in the oil field, understanding and underwriting, our deals. Since it's a passive asset and we require someone else to drill, it does require understanding the oil and gas business. So, get to spend a lot of time looking at the services businesses, the operators, the whole suite of things to kind of help us understand ultimately the timeline to development and when we can monetize our assets.
Okay.
Yeah, very, very, very glad to be here.
Great. Yeah. Great to have you. So I am an oil idiot. And I don't know, Michael, you're Texan, so maybe you know something, but I know very little about this. Can you help me and any other oil idiots that may be listening kind of understand the value chain as far as, you're not actually pulling the oil out of the ground yourself.
Nope.
So help people
Nope.
understand the whole value chain, the stack of value that
Sure. So, and this is something that's very unique to the United States because of the private property rights here, and that individuals or the state or the federal government own the subsurface, the minerals, and can correspondingly lease those minerals to an operator to come in and develop. So it really starts with the oil in the ground that's owned by the mineral owner, whether it's an individual, the federal government, specific states. And then it starts with the oil company, ConocoPhillips, ExxonMobil, Shell, all of the big operators that you would think of. Those operators will come in, they will lease the minerals, they'll aggregate acreage blocks into drillable units, and then they start to bring in the services, right? And that's usually first a drilling rig. And the drilling rig will come in and they'll drill down and, drill the pipe all the way down to the target formation, and they'll cement it in place. And then next they bring in, the fracking crew. And the fracking crew is the one that, comes in and they'll pump tens of thousands of pounds of sand and water downhole. They'll frack the well, and then it starts to flow back. And in each part of kind of the life cycle of the well, there are various services that the operator will need in order to drill, complete, and produce the well. Some of those are provided by the big guys. Everyone probably knows Halliburton. They're the largest, oil field services company in North America, Schlumberger. There's been various forms of Baker Hughes and BJ. And there's been a lot of private equity companies that have, come into what we would call the pressure pumping services. Liberty was one that went public, and again, BJ is another one that's been in various forms through bankruptcy and reconstitution and otherwise. And so at each stage, the operator requires different services, and it's a highly cyclical business, right? The services are somewhat determined by price, right? The price of oil and the commodity that's sold at the wellhead ultimately determines the level of development and the level of money that operators are willing to spend to maintain the production out of the well. because some of the older conventional wells can produce for 30, 40, 50, 60 years. But every so often, someone needs to come in, they need to clean them out, they need to rework them in order to maintain, the economics, right? Because it's not just producing the barrel, there's costs associated with it. You have to have electricity to run the pumps. You have to have someone get the product, the oil and gas, to market. You have field hands, right? And so there's a what they call a lease operating expense that's effectively, the cost to get the barrel to market. And
Okay.
those fluctuate. Sorry, go ahead.
So we've got the mineral rights owners, and then
Yep.
the big oil companies come in and lease up the mineral rights. And
It could be small companies too, right? It's big and small, right? So think of the big publics, but there's also large private operators out there. Yeah, so the oil companies will come in, they'll lease up the mineral right owners.
okay,
And you get paid an upfront lease bonus and you get paid a royalty. The royalty typically is from 1/8 to 25%. Up in North Dakota, most leases are 1/6.
okay. And
And
so
so,
you guys at Overland that's where you guys come in, that you try to
yeah,
aggregate
yeah,
these
yeah,
mineral
yeah.
rights and then either pay services companies to extract the
Well,
minerals
the
or flip them, I would assume, to a larger aggregator.
yeah, like well, the we do not like as a mineral owner, you have no control over the development, right? I can't tell Conoco, come drill my well right now, right? When Conoco comes and drills the well is when Conoco decides. Now it's our job to analyze and make sure that we're underwriting the time to development that makes sense for our return hurdles. But the actual process is actually quite clever. And it's one of the few businesses where there's not really any price discovery. So in order to figure out what someone owns, we have to send someone to a courthouse in North Dakota, whether it's McKenzie County, Williams County, Dunn County, Montreal. And they go and they have to run the title back to an index and bring it forward because everything that's recorded at the public level in the counties only says gross acreage and it doesn't have a purchase price, right? It's typically just your $10 of consideration. So if I go and look at mineral deeds in the public record, I can only see what someone owns in a gross acreage, right? So
Hmm.
when you get west of the Mississippi, a lot of the United States is broken down into section, township, and range. So each section is 640 acres, and a township is 36 sections. And in North Dakota, we're fortunate that most drilling and spacing units are 2 sections. So we'll go and we'll look at a drilling spacing unit and we'll send someone in to get title. They'll send us back a report. It's an ownership report. And we'll send out mailers, we'll make offers, and then we have guys in Denver that will pick up the phone and cold call.
Okay. Wow. So I feel like every time we have a guest on here and they explain what they do, I go, holy crap. Like, this is what you're up against, I think is Patrick O'Shaughnessy's favorite saying. The intricacy here from a legal side, the discovery side, the deal making side seems incredible to me.
Yeah, and and frankly, in a lot of ways, it's hand-to-hand combat because you're dealing with landowners who, for many of it's an exceptionally tough business, right? Like our hit rate when we send out a mailer is probably 1%. And that's not just sending out the letter. Like we have to have someone follow up and call and call and call. We're closing a deal next week that I've spent working with the sellers for 3.5 years. So it's literally hand-to-hand combat. And in large part, it's because for many of these people, there is no price that you can offer them in which they would sell. That they were raised, never sell your minerals. Granddad, homesteaded this farm out here, and he told his kids never sell your minerals. And my dad told me never to sell my minerals, and I'm never selling my minerals. You offer me $1 million an acre, I'm not selling
Interesting.
minerals.
Interesting. So I imagine, given that it's such hand-to-hand combat, much like, a lot of the other small, mid, micro market businesses we talk about on this show, there is probably, I'm guessing, an aggregation market, right? Where you guys can go in and do the hand-to-hand combat. And then the Conocos of the world, they don't want to do the hand-to-hand combat. They come somebody like you and go, oh, great, you've aggregated all of these mineral rights. Now we'll pay you a higher premium than you paid to aggregate them. Is that?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that is one model of doing it. I think of us as a warehouse. So the big advantage that Overland has is our capital. Our capital can be very patient. And a lot of mineral buyers need to buy with like imminent cash flow and imminent production. So we'll go into a drilled spacing unit that will have a single well. And that well was probably drilled in 2010, 2011, 2012. It's like making a couple hundred barrels a month. So it's very little value in the existing production. But we know by looking around that there's going to be infill, right? It's like buying a piece of raw property and being able to add a 30-story apartment building. There's a ton of value in the infill and the development. And so we play that arbitrage. And unlike most mineral buyers, we can sit and hold that single well unit for an extended period of time because we know what to buy it for. And we can buy it for, if we can buy it for cheap enough where we can have an extended hold period, we could wait 10 years for it to be developed. It doesn't matter to us. Whereas a lot of our competition, they need that imminent production. So there's a subset of deals in which just get entirely looked over, and we have some, pricing power and the ability to kind of to take advantage of it. And in terms of our exit strategy, we sell a lot. So, we've probably invested $115 million at this point, and we've returned close to 80 million of that, with retaining a large residual. Each deal kind of stands on its own. So we have sold things as a partial portfolio sale, but a lot of stuff we sell on EnergyNet, which is an online auction market for oil and gas interests.
Oh, wow. Now,
There's
David, you keep opening up all these things. Yeah. We're never going to get these deals. I'm so interested. This is great.
Yeah. And and EnergyNet's been a great, we've been using EnergyNet for years, and it's a great platform because it just opens up. Buying minerals is so hard that there's only certain access points for people to get deals, and that's one of them. So we've had a lot of success selling there. We've sold to other, like you were saying, the mineral aggregators. So those are typically private equity backed, and so they're looking just for cash flow. So when within our 20,000 acre portfolio, there's currently, I would say, a quarter of it is going to be developed in the next year. And so now we can start to think about breaking that up into little pieces and starting to move it and sell it. We sell it to the operators at times. So there's a really good opportunity set in terms of monetizing, because once the asset is drilled and cash flowing, that can all be engineered, right? There's no longer any speculation. Now you're just arguing over a discount value.
Yep. Yep.
Who owns this business? Sense. I want to own this business.
That's owned.
Forget the deals. Forget the deals. Tell me how I can own EnergyNet.
Yeah, Michael, there's a guy on Twitter, Chris Atherton, who I'm happy to make an introduction to. He's the CEO of EnergyNet. He'd be happy to come on. You should have him on. He's an unbelievable guy. I believe it's Ross Perot's family that owns most of that.
Oh, okay. I don't want to buy anything from those guys.
It's been around forever.
Yeah, it's been around for a long time.
So does this act more like a network of brokers, or does it act more like a platform like Biz Buy Sell?
It acts more like a platform like Biz Buy Sell.
Wow.
Fascinating. The network of brokers exists kind of at our level, right? So we get under capital, like the brokers in the oil and gas business are called landmen, even though they're just brokers. Everybody's a broker, right? So the landmen typically are undercapitalized, but they have access to deals. And so they'll come to us and either make a commission or a spread, or they'll hang on to it. And for us, we've had a lot of success because we know our return hurdles really well. And a lot of buyers are very stingy on what they pay the landmen. Whereas we say to them, here's the price we'll buy. If we can make it work, I don't care if you make $1 an acre or $1,000 an acre.
Yep.
Right. Here's my price. Just
same
deliver
dynamic
to me at this price.
Same dynamic in real estate where, people try to squeeze the brokers and they never see any deal flow. If you take care of your brokers, you see the best deal flow first.
Yep. And I think we sit in this, what I would call like a vortex, because again, there's capital. We're not immune to competition. There's plenty of it, but unlike most industries right now, there's not the huge floods of capital coming in, especially at the ground level, because in part, the underlying business has been so volatile and somewhat uninvestable over the last half decade to decade.
Yep.
And so it results in just, less end users of minerals and royalties, but still arguably the same number of brokers and landmen out there. And if you treat people right, they tend to want to do business with you.
Yep.
So
wow, that is awesome.
The coolest thing about this EnergyNet website, by the way, and Bill, tell me when the last time you saw this. They have every single one of their employees' emails and direct phone numbers on their website, including the software developers. When was the last time you
Every
ever
single
saw?
employee, headshots, everything. It's insane.
Like this, look, this guy's a programmer. Like, when was the last time you ever saw a technology company list their programmers, their names, their full everything, and put it right on the website? Like that is something that when I see something like this, I'm like, this place is doing something special where they have no problem with retention. And I have a theory as to what it is. Do you want to know what it is? Their office is in Amarillo, Texas. There are not a lot of tech jobs in Amarillo, Texas, so they don't have to worry about getting poached. But anyway, that's just fascinating.
Yeah, they also do all of like when the states do their lease sales, or right, because the states will lease their minerals to operators. That all goes through EnergyNet, and they've been the beneficiary of some huge lease auctions, especially in New Mexico. I mean, go back and read about some of these crazy lease auctions. You know, they're getting a point off of it, so it's a good business.
Wild. All right. We do have to talk about some deals. So, David, I could go on forever just digging into your business. So interesting. But I would love to hear your expertise on some deals that are related to the space in which you play. Sure. So, Michael has our first one.
Yeah. So, this is near me in San Antonio. And we looked up Moore, Texas is like an hour southwest of San Antonio down by a town called Pearsall. And so this is from Biz Buy Sell. And it is titled South Texas Well Cementing and Acidizing Company dash discounted sale $9 million located in Medina County, which is Moore, Texas, which is southwest of San Antonio. So they are asking $7 million. So how does that work? This title says discounted sale $9 million, but the asking price says $7 million. I guess we'll get into that.
Further discounted.
Yeah, it's just everything must go, I guess. They have no cash flow numbers, no gross revenue numbers. They have inventory of $12 million. So that's fascinating. They pay rent of $8,000 per month, and this business was established in 2020. So the business description, it is business name, yard, employees, current MSAs listed. Boy, this broker did not check their work before hitting send. So anyway, it is a well cementing and acidizing company for sale. So David, for those of us that are numbnuts, what is a well cementing and acidizing company?
So in the traditional, when you're drilling the well and you put the drill pipe down the well, you need to be able to hold it in place, and so they will cement the well in place. And so on the kind of when they talk about primary, I think they mentioned primary cementing. That's what they're doing is, cementing the wellbore in place. It sounds like they only do primary cementing for water wells. And that's usually just a function of the type of equipment, right? Like you need a lot of horsepower to force that cement down hole. The deeper you get, the more horsepower you need. So they just might have some horsepower limitations here. Acidizing is interesting. So if you think about, the oil and gas that comes out of the ground isn't necessarily fully pure, right? There's paraffins, there's wax, there's heavy metals that are brought into it. And over many, many years, this will accumulate around the wellbore. And so you'll see a decline in production because the wellbore itself is, think about like your arteries and cholesterol, right? And so over time, the wellbore will start to build up with this stuff. Again, paraffins, wax, heavy metals, other kind of impurities within the oil. And so one way to increase production later on in the life cycle is to acidize the well, which is to effectively come in, they pump acid down hole, it breaks apart all this stuff, and then they flush it back out. Typically, we see this in more conventional production, right? So not horizontal, drilling and fracking necessarily, but the older, just conventional wells, which are just effectively straight down into a track where the oil is found. The other thing that this company does is it looks like they have a plugging and cementing business. So at the end of the well life, every time an operator drills a well, they have to post a bond. Typically, each state requires the operator to post a bond that will cover the cost of plugging and abandoning a well. With remediation, that typically costs about $50,000 per well. And most of the cost is in this cementing and plugging process. So what they'll do is, again, they'll go back in, they'll analyze the cement around the wellbore, right? Make sure it's still good. And then they actually create a series of cement plugs that they put down hole. So it's not just one, but they'll place typically between 5 and 6 cement plugs, depending on where the oil producing formations are and how deep it is. This specific topic has garnered a lot of recent attention, especially from the Biden administration. People are seeing a tremendous amount of like tail risk and wells that are, abandoned effectively, but not properly plugged. So if I think about, I think growth opportunities in the oil and gas business are pretty limited. But one way to think about it is, if you have access to a business that already has an established plugging and cementing business, there might be additional runway if the government starts to get into subsidizing or actually paying for the plugging and abandoning of wells that have been previously abandoned.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Cool.
Interesting.
Okay, so I think I understand this business. So let me go through the equipment and some of the other stuff they have going on and then go from there. But I understand that this deals specifically with a lot of the cementing during the oil drilling process or rejuvenation, and then also like cementing and capping off and stopping wells that need to stop being an environmental threat. So cool. Okay, so more details. They're on an 8-acre yard. They claim to have bulk plant, silos, lab, and maintenance building with the option to purchase the yard or all equipment and can be relocated. The company was appraised, so it's listing for $7 million. The appraisal was done in September 2020 and was appraised for $10 million. Interesting about this, it appraised for $10 million in September 2020. The established date for the business, 2020. So 9 months in, these guys had somebody come in and tell them it was worth $10 million. Then it says the next line is discounted price of $9 million, which, by the way, agrees with the title but disagrees with the other listed price, which is they want to sell for $7 million. And then next here, they go through and they talk about all the equipment. So, Bill, we talk about heavy CapEx equipment-based businesses. This appears to be one of them. 17 heavyweight tractors, 10 lightweight vehicles, 3 Freemeyer double pump cementing units, a cement batch mixer. I know what that is. 3 water and acid line transport units, and it just keeps going. Wilco bulk units, 4 Tiger cement bulk units, upright cement silos in a setter truck, bulk plant, acid plant, portable cement lab, a bunch of wellhead connections, high pressure testing, iron and hoses, low pressure hoses and connections, and various shop tools. And then if you're interested in more of this, you can get an NDA with Dean Davenport or Jana Davenport, who are the 2 brokers who have Gmail and Outlook.com email addresses respectively. And they actually list the business website. It's Top Force Energy Services. And interesting is the owner wants out to focus on more other projects more in line with his expertise. Like, how do you get into this without knowing what you're doing? Like, I wouldn't go into this without knowing what I'm doing. So, and
this
I
is
think
very-
that's, I mean, I don't think it's that uncommon for this to happen, right? Like the services business, especially on the smaller side, is littered with, is a graveyard of people that are, either have experience in running other services businesses and say, oh, I can do this, or are just in the oil field and naturally, fall into this. When the getting is good on a services business, it's great because the margins on the equipment you could be out with a $600,000 piece of equipment doing $30,000 a day pump jobs. And that's extremely lucrative over time. I think the problem now is that the inputs also are significantly higher, right? The labor costs, the fuel costs, the sand, all of the underlying inputs in this business have to have gone up over the last 12 to 18 months. And you wonder whether or not the pricing power is there on the revenue side to help offset that.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a huge red flag to me, all of like the discrepancies on the dates. And then the guy being like, a couple of years into this is like, all right, I'm ready to try something different. I mean, I think with most oil services businesses at this point, like you're kind of at the top of the cycle. It's really hard to kind of, I think, find a good deal out there. And, we're firm believers in the oil field of like, price is what you pay, value is what you get.
Hmm.
And just because something is like cheap or discounted doesn't mean it's a good deal.
So is the way to underwrite one of these businesses to essentially look at the quality of the assets? I mean, there's so much hard equipment here. And if you go to that website, Michael pulled up the tractor trailer that pulls up to cement your well, it looks like a freaking power plant cement manufacturing facility on a flatbread. It's extremely complicated.
Yep.
So is it basically about trying to understand the quality and the remaining life of the assets? And then can you generate enough demand, and what's the pump job per day, and just like calculate out a yield? Is it basically like that?
Yeah, I mean, I first want to take a look at the underlying MSAs to see what they're pricing on and kind of the terms of those and if they're cancelable or, I mean, the MSA is only as good as its the counterparty's ability to terminate. Um, and so first I'd probably start on the revenue side and think about kind of what am I going to be bringing in? And part of the issue of just looking at it from the asset base is not all of these assets have uses outside of oil and gas. And so there's a lot of mothballed horsepower that exists in the oil field because there was overbuilt during the last during the shale boom, and then the industry contracts. You have horsepower that doesn't really have a use outside of the oil field, and so it's somewhat obsolete. Um, they could tell you it's $12 million worth of inventory, but like, what are you really going to get if you go and try to sell it?
Yeah. I think the other thing that
But
worries
there are
me,
some things,
yeah.
but
Oh,
there
go
are some
ahead.
things like the cement mixers, all of that stuff would have uses outside of oil and gas.
Yeah.
But there are some very big ticket items here that those tractors are likely pretty limited in use.
So one thing that I'm curious about, David. So they have only 8 employees, but they have 27 trucks. Um, so I'm very curious, kind of about that. And we've already, I think, got to the point where we're not necessarily trusting this listing to be 100% correct. But like this is also located, and I'm ignorant about this, but this is located in the area just south of San Antonio, and I'm totally blanking on what the name of it was. The Eagle Ford Shale is kind of this area.
Yeah.
This isn't what I'm hearing is really the more kind of growth areas in terms of the actual fields, right? You're hearing more about the Bakken up in North Dakota and still out West Texas, Midland, and all that kind of area. How much,
Yeah, the Permian. Everyone's focused on the Permian. Eagle Ford's probably, I believe, the third largest producing field in the basin in the country. So there's still a tremendous amount of activity and rigs running there. I think you highlight a very important point: is that COVID transformed the oil and gas business forever. The crash was so severe, especially on the oil field services side, that a lot of the skilled employees that had the knowledge base and knew how to do this left for good,
Mhm.
and they're not going to come back. And so when people are talking about, oh, why can't we raise production? Why can't we raise production? People are really ignoring that there's a huge labor issue. There's tens of thousands of oil field services jobs that are very high paying, right? I mean, 6 figures plus, huge signing bonuses. They're crawling all over one another for skilled labor, and it's just not there, and it's not going to come back.
Why is it not coming back? I mean, was it just that it took forever to kind of convince people to move to the middle of nowhere to do these jobs, and like now was the reset, and you got to slowly fill the puddle again?
Yeah. I think in part, like, I mean, I can speak specifically to North Dakota. Like, do you want to be in Williston, North Dakota in January?
Right.
Right? It's a hard sell. It's a hard sell to begin with, and then you add in industry volatility over the last decade with you know, recently it seems like everything is kind of busted a bit, and that might be new to people that have been started investing since the great financial crisis of 2008. But in the oil field, like, there's been repeated bus. And after a while, as a worker, you're just like, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to, work, get laid off, have to sit around for a year not doing anything, only to be rehired, work, get laid off. It's not, there's other opportunities that are, potentially more consistent. And because you've seen this rapid rise in price, the jobs are not getting filled proportionate to kind of where we'd expect it to be in previous downturns.
Mm-hmm. So
I,
you sort of had this new.
I was going to say, I interviewed a guy in North Dakota yesterday, and he's like, I want out of here. I don't want to work in the oil field. My brother works in the oil field, and my brother wants out of the oil field. Like I just don't think I don't think the lifestyle is very good. You're living in a man camp out in Snyder, Texas. Like there's one barbecue restaurant for 60 miles. Like I, I totally understand where these people are coming from. I don't know that I've ever talked to somebody who's like, you know what? I want to keep working in the oil field. This is great. Like it's never said by anybody.
Yeah, I mean, if you're an experienced hand on a rig with that like a really good team, and you're fine with like 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off, like you could make a really good living.
Yeah.
And there's definitely like the big players have been able to manage to keep their best teams together. And that's the other thing too, is a lot of operators are very suspect of newer services businesses, because these wells are not cheap to drill and maintain. You don't want some green hand getting in there and messing up your production.
Fascinating. So let's say our typical listener is somebody considering kind of a second business, or is looking for a first business for them to buy and operate. Like, is there a world in which you would encourage somebody to look at a business like this or consider it? And if so, like, well, if the answer is yes, how would they go about actually evaluating like how something like this would make sense for them?
I mean, I wouldn't suggest looking at anything in the oil field services business, unless you have already the subject matter expertise or the geographic location and an existing business or something that's ancillary to it. I think that again, it isn't a business that's easily understood by a non-oil and gas person, and so there is kind of required subject matter expertise to hit the ground running. Plus, I think just the cycles in oil field services are very severe.
Mm-hmm.
And I question whether at this point, the other deal that we were potentially going to talked about there was 10x growth already. Like, I just question how much meat is left on the bone, and that you're paying for something that the growth has already been, baked into it. The prospects are not that great, and you're going to be doing hand-to-hand combat to keep your jobs and keep your workers. So I wouldn't be totally, bullish about getting into this business unless there was a very compelling reason. I guess the one thing would be that there may be less capital chasing it. So you might be able to get a better deal. And if you're patient, maybe something like this, where you can kind of monetize some of this equipment. The inventory ends up, I'd probably go in and just figure out what this inventory is worth. I'd start with that, right? Because if you could get comfortable that the underlying inventory is worth more than the purchase price, it starts to get a little bit interesting, right? And then you definitely want to take a look at those MSAs. Think about the term. Think about how the counterparty can cancel them. Who is the counterparty, right? Are they well capitalized? Are they, users of oil field services? Most M&As don't really have like a take or pay component to it. So it's kind of services as needed. Yeah. And then I'd want to, meet the key employees that understand the customer relationships and understand, how the business actually operates in terms of getting, the trucks out to the site and the jobs done in a timely and efficient manner.
Man. So it sounds like, again, one of those instances of the guy that owns this cannonballed into a business he didn't understand in a hot market, and now he's probably getting out at a haircut and looking for somebody who is as enthusiastic as he was the first time around to hold the bag. So don't be that guy, is basically what you're saying.
Yeah. And it's like, just like the timing, like this guy got into the business in 2020 during the COVID lows. Like that would have been the time to buy something because there was so much blood on the streets. and there was so much uncertainty and so much, horror that was probably a good time to pick up stuff. When oil's made a run up to, $100, it's not really the time to be like looking to get into it because of the uncertainty and, the business cycles.
Yeah. One of the other things I always think about is, why am I seeing this deal right now? Like this one looks like the price been cut from 10 million to 9 million to 8 million to 7 million. And you go, surely I, who do not live in North Dakota or Texas, and have nothing about, no knowledge about this, am not the first person to see this deal, which means all of the smart people have passed on it at 10 million, 9 million, 8 million, and 7 million. So why do I think I suddenly have this edge, right?
It's the same thing in our minerals business too. We have, we use SEO and Google and stuff. And if we don't do business in the Permian Basin, we never have. And when we see a deal from the Permian Basin, we ask ourselves that question: why is it coming to us, right? 85% of the private capital in minerals and royalties is invested in the Permian Basin, backed by some of the smartest teams out there. Why are we seeing it at this point? Clearly because all those guys passed on it at the price this person wants.
Exactly.
So I Googled the broker bill, and she's not actually really a broker. She's also an oilfield services company owner. So it is fascinating. The story of this whole business is like, what?
It won't surprise you, man. It's like the oil field is also like one daisy chain after another.
Yeah.
Like everybody's just trying to get their piece, right? Like, oh, I got, I'll help you sell your business and I'll take a cut of it. Like, again, this stuff is pretty common.
Crazy.
Yeah, crazy.
It's all
right. Let's keep it rolling, because we've got another really interesting one. All right. And before we jump into the next deal, we have a word from our sponsors.
Today's sponsor is MicroAcquire, and MicroAcquire is the #1 startup acquisition marketplace, and it is simply the most efficient way to buy and sell startups when you're ready to make your next move. So, we've had Andrew, who's the CEO and founder of the company, on the pod before, and he's been great. The cool thing about MicroAcquire is that most of the conventional options for buying and selling your company, especially a tech one, are expensive for founders. So MicroAcquire puts all the cost and flips that the other side around. So they are free and anonymous listings, and they apply a rigorous vetting process, where actually only 50% of the startups make it on average. They have over 2,000 online businesses listed today at any given time, and a buyer can expect to see a range of startup types that will fit any profile, from SaaS to e-commerce to apps and agencies, and of course more. So different sizes as well, for anything from $5,000 all the way up to $1 million or more in asking price, really for buyers of all sizes. So founders like MicroAcquire too, and they come with the expectation that serious vetted buyers will be showing up in great numbers when they decide to bring their business to market. They've helped hundreds of startups successfully get acquired and facilitated hundreds of millions in closed deal volume. So if you're thinking about buying or selling an online business, then you definitely want to check out MicroAcquire. And thanks to them for sponsoring our episode today. Good friends of the pod. So looking forward to all that, and definitely check out microacquire.com. And if you're somebody looking for the right business, definitely go visit there and consider upgrading to one of their premium accounts, where you pay a bit to start the conversation and see deals and more information than just the other options. So thanks again. And here's back to the episode.
So Michael, you want me to read this one, or are you going to do it?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. So this one is an area that we don't know a ton about, but we thought was really compelling. It is a 118-acre outdoor retail cannabis farm for sale in Boone, Colorado, which is in Pueblo County, Colorado, which is south of Denver. They are asking $5 million for it, and it cash flows $2.5 million a year. So it's 2x cash flow they're asking for it. That being said, it also says the gross revenue is $2.5 million a year, and EBITDA is NA. So I have a few questions about the definition of cash flow and EBITDA and revenue in this case.
I think
says it was established in.
You have to be careful that the answer there is we don't report any income, so we're cash flowing the hell out of this thing.
And by cash flow, they mean like actual suitcases of hundos.
Yeah.
Right. So yeah, his cash flow is like crazy, you know. So they've got, it says it's an indoor and outdoor farm. They've got 2 licenses and 3,600 plants. The owners are retiring after only 4 years in the business, from 2017 to today, or 5 years in the business. It is a fully operational turnkey multi-license grow for sale. The sale includes 2 tier 1 retail marijuana cultivation licenses, 100 acres of land, 2 irrigation pivots, 3 wells, 3-bedroom custom ranch home. You can live near all of your cannabis plants. 2 cultivation and processing buildings, a whole bunch of power, 3-phase power that's already there, and all the growing and processing equipment. So that's about all it says here. But the one thing that's interesting is it says Pueblo County has a moratorium prohibiting new grow licenses. The 2 included licenses are both tier 1, 1,800 plants each, which seems like they're fully saturated on their licenses. And they can also be upgraded to much higher plant counts through the MED, whatever that means. The current licensed outdoor field is 800 by 400, chain link fence, barbed wire cameras, flood irrigated. Growing cannabis under the center pivot would require a modification of premises application with compliant fencing and cameras. And it says the guy is retiring, and it says it's a home-based business, but as we've learned, the home is on the farm. So you live right here at the business. So I'm just interested because there's probably so many layers of this business. What do you guys think of this one?
I do like that they say they'll accept trades, because I'm like, would I trade for a pot farm?
I love that one.
Yeah. I'll trade you my poppy farm for your cannabis farm.
Yeah, why not? Go full Ozark on this stuff. Yeah, David, what do you think?
Yeah, this one just popped out again as like I feel like one of these like the parts are probably more valuable than the whole. I think Bill made a good point about the licenses. I think there's like more marijuana dispensaries in Colorado now than there are liquor stores, and so the wholesale market is very competitive. Even we have recreational marijuana here in Massachusetts, and it's a much more limited regime in terms of licenses, and you can just see that in the pricing. Like you can go out to Denver and it's 60 costs at the retail level 60% less than what it costs here, or it's like 40% less than what it costs here. And I think that's in part because there's just so much product flooding the market. I also think it's interesting that this is only kind of suited for outdoor, probably missing a couple growing cycles given the climate. You probably do, right? There's probably not a 12-month growing season. But irrigated land in Colorado probably has some underlying value. I'd be curious if there was water rights involved with this too, because those could also be quite valuable. Yeah, and again, like just the curious, romantic idea of owning a pot farm in rural Colorado seemed somewhat interesting.
That's an interesting point about the weather, because for folks who have never been to Pueblo County, Colorado, it is the desert. It is freezing in the winter, and can get very hot in the summer, and it is also quite dry. So super interesting point too, David, about the water rights and how are you getting enough water to irrigate this land? It gets very complicated out west.
Yeah, and it sounds like maybe they have wells there or something, but if there's underlying water rights too, those could be quite valuable and something just to consider when doing if you're evaluating this business.
Look
and
at this.
I wonder about like
I was going to say, let's talk about something important. You're only like 90 minutes from a ski resort if you do this business. So anyway, sorry.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like and you're on the Arkansas River. I mean, I wouldn't say that Pueblo's the number one choice for people moving to Colorado, but it could be it's definitely improved like most of the Front Range locations over the last couple decades.
Yeah, this is a solid hour east of Pueblo. Just looking at the map, maybe 45 minutes east of Pueblo. Do you guys think this one, are they selling the dirt here? Is it clear that they own the land, or are they potentially leasing it?
I got the impression they own the land, but just because I guess with the ranch house, but
that's fair.
Kind of implying that it came with it.
Well, it's just interesting because they list the real estate at $1.2 million in the listing, but then they're asking $5 million. So maybe they do own it, and then it's like the real estate plus the business.
Yeah.
So at its core,
do you guys know very much?
I mean,
Do you
at
know
its
very much
core,
about the
the
regulatory environment here?
no.
This is why we have an editor.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's what I was about to say.
Um,
At its
Go
core,
ahead.
you're buying a farm here, and you're dealing with the vagaries of farm economics, which is, you have to dig into, how much limitation on supply is there. Turns out there's only so many licenses in Pueblo County. What about the other counties? Is there uh, the equivalent of the kind of the big buying chains that are going to come in and dictate to you what your prices are, like there is in chicken production or corn or soy production, like all of those. Ultimately, like I understand why they're selling for 2 times earnings because it's a farm. Like you have to dig into all that stuff.
Yeah.
So
A couple other interesting points here. When I lived in Colorado, I knew a guy. He was a commercial real estate broker, a young guy. And when marijuana was recreationally legalized in 2014, he pivoted his business to become a commercial real estate broker exclusively for grow operations in Colorado. And he absolutely crushed it. He became like the guy if you were
Yep.
trying to find to like lease a commercial site and then upfit it for indoor grow. And the thing that reminded me of it is the power here that they explicitly go out of their way to mention in this listing that their indoor grow operation is already outfitted with 300 kVA of three-phase power and lights and all that stuff, because apparently it can be millions of dollars just to get the utility to come in and put in the power that you need to run all these lights. So I think if you were looking at this business, much like the last one, where you're underwriting, really what are the assets worth here? Like, what is the replacement value on this setup? Like, it's 100 acres of irrigated land with wells and an indoor grow operation with power in place and all the equipment. If I had to build this from scratch, what does this cost, even assuming I could get the permits?
Yep. Yeah. Plus the permitting process, and the Colorado regime is very well known at this point. It's been many years, so I think at least from a regulatory environment, you kind of know what you're getting into.
Yep, it does say on here that there is a moratorium on new grow licenses in Pueblo County. Now, my question is, does that matter? Because I'm probably shipping my product from Pueblo County all over the state of Colorado, right? And so similarly, unless there's a moratorium on new licenses in Colorado, does that actually provide me much protection?
Right.
Or is this a local product thing where people wanted to come from where, consume it where it's grown? I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I was going to say I think it gets transported throughout the state. I think it's just a function too of zoning, and you're saying about your friend that moved into the grow space. All of the industrial real estate in core of Denver got bought up and converted into grow operations
Yes,
because of all the reasons you said with power and the like.
it was bonkers. So I was there in Denver and Boulder at the time looking for a warehouse for my e-commerce business at the time. And I'm going to butcher the numbers, but it was something, as I said, marijuana got legalized in 2014. And from 2014 to like 2016, which is about when I left, the per square foot lease rate on like grow suitable, but basically also e-commerce warehouse real estate in Boulder and Denver area went up by like 50 to 80% in like 2 years, just from the demand, the grow house demand, which was fascinating. And I don't know where it's gone since. I mean, I've been gone from there for 5 years. The disruption to the local market economics from the legalization of marijuana, even unrelated to the marijuana industry, was fascinating.
Yeah, because it's such a tight corridor of industrial space there.
Right. So it was, and we ended up not leasing anything. I ended up moving to Charlotte, North Carolina, doing it here, partially because it was so expensive. It was wild. So I think there's assets here, interestingly, much like the cement pumping. Understanding the replacement value of the assets you're getting is important. All right. Anything further on this one, guys? All right. Awesome. Well, let's wrap it up. David, it was awesome having you here today. So insightful on the oil and gas industry, and the parallels to cannabis farming were also super interesting to me. So I'd love to just give you a chance to make an ask of our listeners. Where can they find you on the internet, and what can they do to help you out?
Sure. You can find me on Twitter, David Rontal. You also find me on LinkedIn, If you have any questions about the oil and gas business or minerals and royalties specifically, feel free to reach out to me. My email is drontal@overlandoil.com.
Awesome. Thanks so much. I bet you will get some curious emails from folks. So thanks for being here, David. It was awesome to get to know you a little bit and learn about your business. We'll see you next week.
Thank you.